So while you were scrolling through your feed this weekend, worrying about whatever manufactured outrage the mainstream media was pushing, an entire country just exploded. And I mean literally, tear gas, barricades getting whipped apart, riot police getting dragged into mobs and beaten with hammers. This happened Saturday in Mexico City at the National Palace. And if you didn't hear about it, well, that tells you everything you need to know about what the media doesn't want you to see. Because here's what actually went down. Generation Z in Mexico, people my age, early 20s, some teenagers, they stormed their presidential palace. Not metaphorically, they physically tore down the metal barricades, breached the security perimeter, and clashed with hundreds of riot police in what's being called the biggest anti-government uprising since President Claudia Sheinbaum took office. Over 120 people injured, 40 cops hospitalized. And the reason nobody's talking about it? Because it destroys the narrative. My position is this: Mexico is a failed narco-state where the government works for the cartels instead of the people. And what we just witnessed is an entire generation finally saying we're done dying for your corruption. And the media's silence on this? That's intentional, because if they admit Mexico has a cartel problem, they have to admit Trump was right all along. Let me back up and explain how we got here, because this didn't just happen out of nowhere. November 1st, literally 2 weeks ago, Mayor Carlos Manzo was assassinated, shot 7 times in front of hundreds of people during Day of the Dead celebrations. He was holding a child in his arms when they killed him.
And Manzo wasn't just some random politician. This guy had earned the nickname Mexican Bukele, after the El Salvador president who actually cracked down on gangs, because he was one of the few officials actually trying to fight the cartels in Michoacan. He'd been publicly begging President Sheinbaum for months. Help us. The cartels are killing us. The state governor is corrupt. The police are bought off. Nobody listened. Well, correction. They gave him 14 National Guard soldiers for protection. Here's the thing that's absolutely insane. Manzo was the 7th municipal president killed in Michoacan under the current governor. 7th. And he was the 6th mayor murdered in Mexico in 2025 alone, and we're not even at the end of the year yet. Think about that. 6 mayors assassinated in 10 months. That's not a country, that's a war zone where if you try to do your job and protect citizens, you get executed in broad daylight. The day after Manzo's funeral, thousands of people took to the streets chanting "Justice, out with Morena," that's Sheinbaum's ruling party, and the protests didn't stop. They spread to over 50 cities across Mexico. This wasn't some localized anger, this was a national awakening. Fast forward to Saturday, November 15th. I'm going to walk you through what happened because the footage is absolutely wild. A group called Generation Z Mexico organized massive demonstrations in Mexico City and dozens of other cities. They released a manifesto, and this is important. They said they're neither left-wing nor right-wing, just the generation that is tired of bowing our heads. And that's what terrifies the establishment. This isn't about political parties. The protesters were waving Mexican flags, not party flags. They're not trying to replace one corrupt party with another corrupt party. They're saying, our government sold us out to the cartels and we want our country back.
So thousands of people marched from the Angel of Independence Monument down Reforma Avenue toward the Zocalo. That's the main square where the National Palace is. For hours, it's peaceful. Young people, old people, doctors, teachers, families, all marching together. And you know what some of these Gen Z kids were carrying? One-piece pirate flags. Yeah, that anime flag that's become this global symbol of youth rebellion, which is kind of perfect because they're literally fighting actual pirates, just the drug cartel kind instead of the cartoon kind. But then they reached the National Palace, and that's where everything goes sideways. Sheinbaum had erected these massive metal barricades, like prison-style welded steel barriers, because she knew the protests were coming. And when the crowd got there, a smaller group, they're calling them the Black Bloc, starts trying to tear these barriers down. We're talking angle grinders, hammers, metal poles, whatever they could grab. The riot police responded with tear gas, lots of it, plumes of the stuff filling the entire plaza, but the protesters didn't back down. The footage shows them literally ripping apart welded steel with their bare hands and improvised tools. And when the barrier started coming down, that's when it got brutal. Protesters were dragging riot police out of formation and beating them with hammers and chains. Police were getting stripped of their shields and radios. Explosive devices were being thrown. On the other side, riot police were deploying CS powder, flashbangs, more tear gas. They even formed this ancient Roman testudo formation, where they lock shields in a defensive phalanx. It was medieval warfare in 2025. By the end of Saturday night, over 100 police officers injured, 40 hospitalized, 20 civilians hurt, about 20 people arrested, and portions of that security barrier completely destroyed. The protesters breached the outer perimeter of the National Palace.
Now, here's where this gets really uncomfortable for the media and for a lot of politicians. There's a Mexican senator named Lily Tellez who's been saying for months publicly on Fox News that President Sheinbaum and her Morena party have taken cartel money. She's straight up accusing them of being narco-politicians. And get this, Sheinbaum allegedly threatened her with criminal prosecution and jail time just for saying that on TV. Yeah, that's totally what innocent people do, right? When you're falsely accused of working with drug cartels, you definitely threaten to imprison the person making the accusation. That'll clear things right up. And it's not like Sheinbaum's being helpful here. Back in May, Trump offered U.S. military assistance to help Mexico fight the cartels. You know what Sheinbaum said? She publicly rejected it. Said Mexico will never accept American military presence on their soil. No, President Trump, our territory is inalienable. Which, okay, fine, sovereignty matters, I get it. But then what's your plan? Because here's what we know. Mexico averages about 60 murders per day. 60, every single day. People are disappearing constantly. Mayors are getting assassinated at family events. The cartels have killed somewhere between 20 and 37 political candidates. The numbers vary depending on who's counting, but either way, that's a double-digit amount of people who tried to run for office and got murdered for it. And Sheinbaum's response to all of this? When the protests happened Saturday, she immediately accused right-wing parties of infiltrating the movement. Said they were using bots to inflate attendance. Of course, it's always bots or right-wing conspiracies. Never legitimate anger from citizens who are, tired of living in constant fear. Some reporters in Mexico City even questioned whether the protests were truly organic, suggesting they weren't seeing many young people despite the whole Gen Z branding. Which is hilarious because there's literally thousands of hours of video footage showing young protesters. But sure, let's pretend it's all manufactured. And speaking of manufactured narratives, let's talk about why this story got buried. You'd think Generation Z storms presidential palace in a narco-state would be wall-to-wall coverage on every network, right? Nope, barely made a blip. The mainstream media has spent years portraying the Mexican government as the good guys, standing up to big bad Trump and his mean border policies. They've pushed this narrative that concerns about Mexican cartel violence were just xenophobic fear-mongering. Oh, you're worried about the border? You're probably just racist. That's been the playbook. And now we've got Mexican Gen Z kids literally tearing down barriers at their presidential palace, chanting that their government is in bed with narcos. And the media is like, let's talk about something else. Because acknowledging that Mexico has a massive cartel problem, that it's essentially a failed state where politicians are regularly assassinated and the government appears complicit, that would mean admitting Trump was right about the border, right about the cartels, right about Mexico needing help. And we can't have that. Better to just not cover it, or cover it minimally, or frame it as right-wing agitators causing trouble. Anything but the truth.
Some outlets that did cover it tried to spin it as a color revolution. Foreign interference, U.S. billionaires funding protests, all that. There are Twitter threads claiming it's all orchestrated by the Atlas Network and Mexican billionaire Ricardo Salinas. Maybe there's some truth to that. I don't know. But you also have a dead mayor who is begging for help, 60 murders a day, and an entire generation saying we can't live like this anymore. That seems pretty organic to me. So where does this go from here? Well, the protesters are already planning more demonstrations. November 20th is the next big one. And they're not backing down. One of the chants Saturday was, "This is how you should have protected Carlos Manzo." Basically telling the police, you're more aggressive with us than you are with the actual cartels, which Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? The Mexican people, especially young people, are looking at countries like El Salvador, where Bukele actually dealt with gang violence. I mean, he locked up tens of thousands of gang members, and El Salvador's murder rate dropped by like 90%. And they're asking, why can't we have that? Why do we have to live in this failed state? And here's what kills me. According to reports from the protests, these Gen Z kids are saying they don't even care where help comes from. America, Russia, whoever. They just want the cartels gone. They want to be able to go to school, go to work, celebrate holidays without worrying about getting caught in cartel violence. The bar is literally on the ground. Please stop letting us get murdered shouldn't be a radical ask.
Now, Trump's talked about potentially sending U.S. military into Mexico to deal with cartels, and I know that makes people uncomfortable. Sounds like imperialism or whatever. But let's be real about the power differential here. The cartels have some military-grade equipment, maybe some armored vehicles. The U.S. military has tanks, aircraft carriers, drones, the most sophisticated weaponry on the planet. If we actually committed to eliminating the cartels, not this half-measure nonsense, but actually winning, we could do it in months, maybe weeks. But Sheinbaum doesn't want that help. And the question is why? If your country is being torn apart by cartel violence, if your mayors are getting assassinated, if 60 people are dying every day, why would you reject assistance? Unless you're protecting the people doing the killing. Mexican Senator Tellez basically said it. The cartels give money to politicians, and in return, those politicians protect the cartels. It's a business arrangement. And the Mexican people are the ones paying the price. Look, I don't have all the answers here. This is decades of corruption and violence we're talking about. But what I do know is this. When you have mayors getting executed in front of children at community celebrations, when an entire generation is storming their presidential palace saying, our government chose the cartels over us, when you have a president who rejects outside help while offering no effective alternative and threatens to jail senators who criticize her, you've got a failed state.